Through the unforgiving snowfall and biting wind, Jake's truck thundered along the icy road. The storm had transformed the once bustling highway into a desolate stretch with only a few brave souls venturing out into the tempestuous weather. Every now and then, a lone car would zip past, quickly disappearing into the swirling snow, its tail lights fading into the white abyss. Inside the cozy confines of the truck, Jake's gaze shifted to a photograph of his wife, Emma, hanging from the rearview mirror. Her radiant smile, frozen in that small frame, filled his heart with warmth. With Christmas just on the horizon, his anticipation was tangible. On the final stretch of his long journey back home, Jake's heart swelled with excitement. He had traveled across the country, crisscrossing from one end to the other, all for this moment. In the glove compartment of his truck, he carefully retrieved a beautifully wrapped box containing a special gift for Emma. Inside, a gleaming gold necklace awaited, promising joy and happiness. With a smile on his face, Jake placed the box back in its spot, knowing that soon it would be in Emma's hands. As he pressed down on the accelerator, the truck powered through the thickening snow, heading toward the city's twinkling lights. Finally reaching a truck stop, Jake decided to continue the rest of the way on foot. Walking through the streets, a wave of nostalgia washed over him. The town had changed since his departure, shedding its gloomy autumn days. Even under a gray sky, there was now a tangible warmth in the air. The streets were alive with bustling individuals, their expressions aglow with the joyous spirit of the season. They paused momentarily to appreciate the festive mistletoe and the beautiful holiday decorations that adorned the shop windows. Jake's pace quickened with anticipation, eager to reunite with Emma and embark on their Christmas festivities side by side. With the anticipation of the surprise gift he had in store for her, he couldn't help but imagine the joy and laughter that would fill their humble abode. This thought propelled him forward, each step serving as a beat in the symphony of his return. As Jake leisurely made his way into the bustling apartment complex, the familiar sounds of the neighborhood enveloped him like a warm embrace. He greeted his neighbors with a nod and a genuine smile, their hurried footsteps resonating against the sturdy concrete walls. "Evening, Mr. Williams," he called out cheerfully to the elderly man shuffling past. Mr. Williams looked up, his face adorned with deep wrinkles, and reciprocated the greeting with a wide grin. "Evening, Jake. Beautiful weather we're having, don't you think?" "Can't complain," Jake agreed, his gaze shifting towards a young mother struggling with a baby carriage at the bottom of the stairs. Driven by an instinctive impulse, he approached her without hesitation. "Hey, let me lend you a hand," he offered. The mother, her tired eyes revealing a hint of relief, gratefully nodded in response. "Thank you so much," she expressed her gratitude. "These stairs are an absolute nightmare with this thing." Together, they carefully navigated the narrow staircase, ensuring the baby remained blissfully unaware of the exertion. Upon reaching the third floor, she thanked him once more. As Jake stood outside his own door, a mischievous spark ignited in his eyes. With suppressed excitement, he discreetly pressed the doorbell and swiftly retreated behind the wall, his heart pounding with anticipation of the surprise he had planned for Emma. In his mind, he envisioned her opening the door, her eyes scanning the area, and then the sheer delight that would wash over her face upon spotting him. However, seconds turned into minutes, and the expected sounds of laughter and joyful astonishment never materialized. Instead, a heavy silence hung in the air, causing Jake's brow to furrow with confusion. He stepped back into view and pressed the bell again, but a sense of unease began to crawl up his spine. "Emma," he called out, his voice echoing faintly through the empty hallway. "Are you there?" The echoes remained unanswered, deepening the knot of worry. The playful anticipation that once filled Jake's mind now dissolved into a cold, growing concern. As he reached for the doorknob, his thoughts raced with possibilities of why Emma hadn't responded. Perplexed and with a growing frown etched on his face, Jake searched through his pockets, finally finding the cool metal of his keys. With an eerie finality, the lock clicked open, amplifying his unease. "Hello, is anyone home?" he called out, stepping into the dark and unwelcome hallway. His voice reverberated through the apartment, a forced cheerfulness masking his growing unease. "I'm home." "Surprise, my love." But the apartment offered no response, only an eerie silence that hung in the stale air. The scent of disuse weighed heavily, permeating every corner. Ignoring the need to remove his shoes, a habit he had adopted from Emma, Jake clumsily made his way through the apartment. The living room remained unchanged, yet unsettlingly still. The couch cushions sat undisturbed, the television screen a vacant, lifeless eye. "Emma," he called out once more, his voice now a mere whisper of fading hope. The kitchen, once the heart of their home, felt devoid of warmth and vitality. No dirty dishes cluttered the sink, no lingering aroma of their last shared meal. Even the refrigerator hummed a solitary tune, its door adorned with irrelevant grocery lists and forgotten reminders. At last, he pushed open the bedroom door, his last glimmer of hope clinging on. The bed lay perfectly made, the sheets smooth and untouched, as if waiting for an occupant who would never return. His heart sank. The undeniable evidence lay in the untouched, substantial layer of dust that blanketed everything in the room. It whispered the untold narrative of Emma's prolonged absence, possibly spanning days or even weeks. Jake's thoughts sprinted, a flurry of unsettling inquiries growing more disconcerting with each passing moment. His mind raced with worry as he pondered where she could have disappeared to without a single word. The absence of any contact from her only heightened his growing alarm. His heart pounded in his chest, a relentless beat of anxiety. In a rush, he grabbed his phone, hoping for some answers, only to be met with a lifeless screen, drained of all battery power. Frustration surged through him, and he flung the useless device aside, its clatter echoing in the empty apartment. The silence that enveloped him felt suffocating, suffused with unanswered questions. Determined, he hurried toward the table where the landline sat, his movements fueled by desperation. But what awaited him there was not the solution he sought, but rather the conclusion to all his uncertainties. His eyes fell upon a note, its words penned in Emma's unmistakable graceful script. "I'm sorry it didn't work out," he read aloud, each word piercing his heart like a sharp jab. "I realized I deserve more. I found someone else and discovered happiness. May the same befall you. Farewell." The word farewell reverberated in his thoughts, a harsh and conclusive whisper. His hands quivered as he crumpled the parchment, the smudged words distorting beneath his tightening grasp. Uttering a guttural cry of torment, he flung it against the wall, the paper's flight tragically fleeting, yet its reverberation filling the vacant chambers. What is the true significance of those words? Jake's voice faltered as he collapsed onto the couch, the cushions accepting his body but failing to alleviate his desolation. The room provided no solace, no response. Only in his memories did Emma, now a specter, hold the key to his tumultuous storm of inquiries. In the eerie silence, he couldn't help but notice how little of her essence remained, devoid of its vitality and warmth. Yet within this emptiness, a faint, almost otherworldly fragrance lingered, Emma's perfume. It drifted from the slightly ajar wardrobe, a cruel reminder of her presence now painfully absent. Lost in a whirlwind of recollections, Jake's thoughts wandered to the origin of it all, Emma's workplace, a bustling fast food joint adorned with never-dimming neon lights. 2 years ago, their paths unexpectedly collided in that very spot. Emma had been a newcomer then, her eyes wide with a blend of excitement and apprehension that the city often ignited in those hailing from quieter, smaller towns. It was during one of his routine visits to the restaurant that Jake's eyes first fell upon her amidst a growing line of disgruntled customers. She struggled with the cash register, her face reddening with humiliation. As Jake approached the counter, ready to place his usual order, it was not his request that captured his attention, but rather her apologetic and flustered demeanor. "I apologize profusely," she stammered, her gaze darting anxiously toward her new colleagues. In response, Jake offered a comforting smile. "No need to worry, it takes time to get the hang of things here. By the way, my name is Jake." "Emma," she had replied with a shy smile, her anxiety momentarily fading away. And so, their story began. Jake found himself drawn to the restaurant more frequently, seizing every opportunity to share tidbits of wisdom about the city. "You know," he had mentioned one day, "there's this incredible coffee shop just a couple blocks away. And if you ever find yourself lost, just look for the vibrant mural on 5th Street. It's a great landmark. As their connection grew, their conversations flowed effortlessly, mirroring the ceaseless rhythm of the city. Love blossomed amidst the clatter of trays and the enticing aroma of sizzling fries, an unexpected romance unfolding in the midst of the most mundane of locations. Their love story began, and they exchanged vows brimming with hopes and the promise of an intertwined future. But now, as Jake lingered outside the restaurant, its neon sign flickering like a symbol of shattered dreams, all that remained of their once vibrant life was the echo of her laughter resonating in his mind and the crumpled note forgotten beneath the sofa. Pushing open the door, the familiar chime of the entrance bell seemed almost taunting in its cheerful melody. With a heavy heart, he stepped inside, each footfall a pilgrimage into a past that felt simultaneously near and irretrievably distant. The moment Jake crossed the threshold, the cashier's customary exuberance vanished without a trace. Jake's smile faded as he recognized the familiar face of the cashier, Paul. There was an uneasy sense of recognition in Paul's eyes, a stark contrast to the warm familiarity Jake had grown accustomed to as Emma's husband. Approaching the counter, Jake tried to maintain a composed demeanor despite the inner turmoil that churned within him. "Is Emma working today?" he asked, attempting to sound nonchalant. Paul, usually friendly and talkative, now seemed at a loss for words. His eyes darted nervously as he hesitated, mumbling something incomprehensible. Leaning in closer, Jake strained to catch Paul's words, sensing the tension. Paul glanced over his shoulder before quickly disappearing into the back. When he finally returned, his discomfort was palpable. Paul hesitated, avoiding eye contact with Jake. "She, stepped out," he finally said, his tone hinting at something being off. Jake's intuition kicked in, sensing that there was more to the story. "Stepped out? Where did she go?" he probed, trying to uncover the truth. Paul's apologetic tone didn't provide much clarity. "I honestly don't know, Jake," he replied. "That's all the manager told me." The weight of unspoken truths hung in the air as Jake's desire to speak with the manager intensified. Finally, Lucy, the manager, approached, her sympathetic expression revealing that there was more to this situation. Her eyes held a reflection of understanding and empathy. Jake's mind was instantly filled with a sense of sorrow that sent alarm bells ringing. As he approached, Lucy greeted him with an unusual softness in her voice, a departure from her usual brisk demeanor. Curiosity and concern filled Jake's eyes as he searched Lucy's face for any sign, any indication of where Emma might be or how she was feeling. Finally, Lucy spoke, her voice filled with genuine remorse. "I apologize, Jake," she said, her tone hushed and sincere. "Emma was here earlier, but she left in a rush." Jake stepped out of the restaurant, the bitter cold air biting at his skin, a sharp contrast to the stifling atmosphere he had just left behind. As he walked, his mind raced with questions, desperately seeking answers to the sudden departure of Emma. He wasn't there to convince her to come back, but rather to find solace for the ache in his heart. The city streets, once filled with memories of their life together, now seemed empty and devoid of meaning. It occurred to him that Emma's co-workers must have sensed her unhappiness, yet they remained silent, respecting her privacy even in her absence. The uncertainty of whether she would return lingered in his thoughts, casting a shadow over his every step. The present moment exuded an unfamiliar and distant aura. Almost instinctively, he felt a magnetic pull towards a location adorned with joyful recollections. In that very place, surrounded by the magnificence of ancient structures and the delightful allure of a charming French bistro, they had once reveled in love, reveling in the comforting embrace of one another's presence. Immersed in a vast ocean of memories, Jake's heart skipped a beat when a familiar silhouette materialized from within the confines of the restaurant. From afar, Jake could see Emma's elegant movements, unmistakable even at a distance. She approached a sleek silver Mercedes, where a man dressed in impeccable attire stood, holding the door open for her. It was David, Emma's boss, renowned for his commanding presence and smooth, bald head. A rush of emotions overwhelmed Jake, shock, betrayal, and a haunting sense of reality crumbling before his eyes. Time seemed to stretch as Emma gracefully entered the car, the scene unfolding like a vivid tableau of his deepest fears materializing. Jake remained rooted in place, the frigid air now insignificant compared to the icy grip of realization tightening around his heart. David, a figure enveloped in whispers and rumors, was no stranger to Jake. He had heard the tales, the whispered rumors that painted a dark picture of a past intertwined with money laundering and potential affiliations with criminal organizations. The word on the street was that David had utilized his questionable fortune to establish a lavish facade of legitimacy, boasting a portfolio of upscale restaurants, including the very one Emma had just departed. In the collective consciousness of the city, David held a position that evoked both fear and reverence. His vast wealth and powerful connections cast an imposing shadow, discouraging many from stepping out of line. However, Jake couldn't help but feel a bitter cynicism towards this respect, founded solely on fear and material wealth. It lacked the solid groundwork of genuine admiration or moral uprightness. As the initial shock subsided and transformed into a profound, throbbing sense of betrayal, Jake grappled with his emotions. The question gnawed at him relentlessly: why, Emma? How could she, someone I had always seen as honest and decent, choose to abandon me for a man like David? The truth settled heavily in his heart, weighing him down like lead. It wasn't just the loss of Emma that tormented him, it was the destruction of his perception of who she truly was. The Emma he had known, the one who had shared laughter and dreams with him, now felt like a stranger. Her choices were a puzzle wrapped in the allure of a life that Jake couldn't fathom. Overwhelmed by desperation, Jake lunged forward, his feet slipping on the slush-coated pavement. His heart raced in his chest, clinging to a flicker of hope. Jake watched helplessly as the sleek Mercedes effortlessly merged into the flow of traffic, a symbol of the new life Emma had embraced. But it was too late. The car vanished around a corner, its tail lights flickering briefly before disappearing into the city's intricate maze. Left alone in the snow-covered street, Jake's breath materialized in the freezing air, a visual reminder of his dwindling opportunities. He pulled his hat lower, a feeble defense against the biting cold, and then raised his hood, shrouding himself in darkness and fabric. With his head bowed against the frigid wind, Jake set off, his steps determined and brisk. The bustling sidewalk seemed to close in around him, each passerby oblivious to the unraveling of his world. For days, Jake drifted through a fog of alcohol, lost in his own thoughts. Reality's harsh edges dissolved into a hazy mist, numbing his senses. The once shared sanctuary of the apartment now reverberated with the specters of memories, each room serving as a painful reminder of a life that had slipped through his grasp. In these solitary moments, his mind teetered on the precipice between dreams and waking nightmares. The slightest sound would startle him, his heart leaping with a flicker of hope that refused to extinguish. The floorboards creaking, the wind whispering against the windows, every noise seemed to herald Emma's return, and each time, propelled by desperate optimism, he would rush to the hallway with an intensity that contradicted his despair. But the doorway remained empty, a silent testament to his abandonment. As grief washed over Jake, his knees gave way, causing him to crumple onto the unyielding floor. The frigid tiles bore witness to his anguish, while his clenched fist met the ground, a tangible outlet for the storm of emotions that consumed him. In the vast emptiness, the resounding thuds reverberated, providing a sharp contrast to the oppressive silence that enveloped him. In a state of intoxicated delusion, he was convinced that he caught a glimpse of Emma's face peering through the window, her smile a haunting illusion. His heart skipped a beat as he scrambled onto the ledge, his trembling fingers struggling with the latch. The treacherous fall from the fourth floor barely registered in his mind, but all he encountered was a faint breeze and the desolate darkness, Emma's image dissipating into nothingness. His life, precariously balanced on the edge both literally and metaphorically, might have spiraled further if not for the timely intervention of Mr. Williams, his elderly neighbor residing downstairs. Stirred by the incessant noise, the old man was compelled to venture to Jake's door in the early hours of the morning. On the morning of Christmas, Jake, with tired eyes and messy hair, stumbled to the door. As he opened it, he saw Mr. Williams standing there, checking his watch that displayed 3:20 a.m. "Oh, "It's you," Jake muttered, his voice filled with weariness. Mr. Williams entered the apartment, his greeting of Merry Christmas sounding nonchalant. His eyes swiftly scanned the room, taking in the chaos: empty bottles scattered across the living room, unwashed dishes piled up, and an atmosphere of neglect that hung in the stale air. Jake followed behind him, feeling a deep sense of shame as his cheeks flushed. Running his fingers through his disheveled hair, he confessed, "I've had enough of this." He used a t-shirt to wipe away the traces of his recent emotional collapse, attempting to conceal the aftermath. With a hushed tone, he admitted, "There's no joy in celebrating. It feels more like mourning." His voice barely above a whisper, he continued, "My wife has left me, and I've turned to alcohol for solace." Jake extended a glass of whiskey towards Mr. Williams, offering, "Care to join me?" Accepting the glass, Mr. Williams's hand remained steady as he took a contemplative sip. Taking a seat in the armchair, he gestured for Jake to join him, silently inviting him to share his burdens. Jake sank into the couch, his words flowing out effortlessly, untangling the complicated tale of his relationship with Emma. In the soft glow of the living room, his voice quivered with a mixture of bewilderment and anguish as he recounted the intricate details: the painful breakup, the heart-wrenching note, and the shattered remnants of their once shared life now scattered in disarray. "Did I have a decent income?" "Absolutely. It may not have been as much as her new boyfriend, but it wasn't too shabby either." "Did I take her on a trip to Cancun?" "You bet." "And gifts, countless," he listed off each one, a testament to his love and devotion. "I don't know, man," Jake continued, his eyes drifting into the distance as if seeking answers within the shadows of the room. "Maybe I missed something. After all, I gave her everything she needed. Perhaps it's due to my status as an orphan," Jake pondered, his words carrying a hint of vulnerability that he rarely revealed. "It's true that I spent my childhood in an orphanage, devoid of parents, but I can't be held accountable for that." Mr. Williams listened attentively, his face reflecting understanding. He took a sip of whiskey, feeling the fiery liquid slide down his throat as he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "No, my dear Jake, that is not the reason," Mr. Williams responded gently, his head shaking slightly in a gesture of empathy. "Jake, let me tell you about the unpredictable nature of human beings. They have a tendency to proclaim undying love one moment, only to move on to someone new the next. This behavior isn't limited to just one gender, men are just as guilty. I once knew a man who experienced the pain of being abandoned by his wife. In a twisted act of vengeance, he turned around and left the next woman he encountered. But in the end, who was truly harmed by his actions? Alone, he sits, drowning his sorrows in a sea of solitude. Oh, the intricacies of human nature, Jake ponders as he absorbs each word spoken by Mr. Williams, a blend of melancholy and undeniable truth. Their eyes lock, an unspoken invitation for Jake to unleash his innermost fears. "I'm lost," Jake confesses, his voice shattering the silence. "Emma was my love, and yet she inflicted this pain upon me. What purpose is there for me to continue living? Why bother with life anymore?" Mr. Williams pondered his response, choosing his words with great care. "Well, Jake, sometimes you can simply live without any specific purpose. If she decided to leave, then perhaps she wasn't the right person for you. Why mourn for someone who made the choice not to stay? Consider it a liberation from a weight on your shoulders. If you were drowning and she made no effort to save you, would you still cling to her? Life, my dear Jake, is a priceless treasure. It is meant to be embraced and savored." Jake's heart sank as he absorbed the weight of Mr. Williams's words, causing him to release a deep, heavy sigh. A glimmer of understanding broke through the haze of despair, prompting him to apologize. "I'm truly sorry for all the trouble I've caused you." Determination filled his voice as he made a decision. "I won't be around tonight. I'm leaving town, so you won't have to worry about me on Christmas Eve." Hastily, Jake located his scattered clothes and swiftly dressed himself. Seeking solace, he headed toward the bathroom, surprised by the therapeutic effect the conversation with Mr. Williams had on him. With a gentle groan, Mr. Williams rose from his chair, his aged bones protesting the movement as he shuffled towards the exit. "Merry Christmas," he called out, his voice radiating warmth that starkly contrasted the frigidness of the apartment. From the depths of the bathroom, Jake's voice echoed, tinged with a bittersweet acknowledgement. "Merry Christmas," he replied, his words laced with a hint of uncertainty. As the door softly closed behind Mr. Williams, Jake whispered to himself, "I can't say for certain if it will be a Merry Christmas, but only time will tell." Alone in his apartment, bathed in the soft glow of Christmas morning, Jake braced himself for the start of a new chapter in his life, filled with unknowns. In the midst of despair, a glimmer of hope emerged unexpectedly, courtesy of a wise neighbor. While families gathered in cozy homes celebrating Christmas Eve, Jake found himself alone, navigating his truck along a snow-covered highway. The world outside was a hazy expanse of white, the road barely discernible through the relentless snowfall. With desperate determination, he pressed on, eager to leave behind the shattered remains of a life that had crumbled without warning. Though the icy road demanded caution, Jake's thoughts were elsewhere, consumed by a whirlwind of memories and remorse. The desolate highway mirrored his own overwhelming sense of loneliness, the night enveloped in silence except for sporadic bursts of fireworks reflecting in the rearview mirror. Jake yearned for a glimmer of happiness. Desperate to infuse some cheer into the moment, he switched on the car's music, filling the speakers with the melodies of festive songs. Each note served as a bitter reminder of a time when Christmas was synonymous with joy and excitement. Raising a box of grape juice to his lips, Jake offered a solitary toast to himself. "Merry Christmas," he whispered, his voice barely audible amidst the music. As a firework exploded to the left, illuminating the darkness with a vibrant display of colors, a small smile tugged at Jake's lips. It was a stark contrast to the bleak Christmases of his challenging childhood, yet those memories held a certain nostalgic charm, a reminder of simpler days filled with hope. Once a cherished time of year, Christmas now felt like just another day to Jake. As he drove through the snowy expanse, he whispered a silent holiday greeting to the unseen revelers behind the forest. Pressing on the gas pedal, he disappeared into the winter landscape. 2 weeks later, as Jake made his way back to the city, the holiday season had become a distant memory. The crisp January morning signaled a return to the routines of everyday life. Glancing at the dashboard, he couldn't ignore the ominously low fuel gauge. Just in time, a sign for a nearby gas station appeared, and he veered off the highway with a sense of relief. Jake's journey was interrupted by a sudden burst of activity as he pulled up to the gas station. The frigid air stung his skin as he stepped out of the car, making his way toward the gas pump, anxious for a moment of respite from the cold. He approached the entrance of the building. Just as he reached out to open the door, it swung open with force, revealing a man in nothing but a shirt. Startled by the unexpected sight, Jake couldn't help but pause, his curiosity piqued. The cashier's alarmed and hurried expression added to the sense of unease that washed over him. This unexpected encounter shattered the tranquility of his journey, leaving him both intrigued and concerned. As he watched the cashier's every move, Jake's irritation dissolved in an instant when the cashier's desperate cry pierced through the air, compelling him to abandon his initial annoyance and follow the man into the store. As he entered, a shocking scene unfolded before his eyes. A young woman lay sprawled on the floor, her features twisted in agony as she tightly held onto her abdomen. Jake's eyes widened in sheer alarm. What on earth is happening here? Is she in the throes of childbirth? He blurted out involuntarily, recoiling a step. Why haven't you contacted emergency services? He asked, his voice filled with both worry and bewilderment. I already did. They're en route, but there's been a collision on the highway, so their arrival might be delayed, the cashier responded, his voice trembling with panic. Could you transport her to the hospital? Your truck might be able to make it. Without any hesitation, Jake nodded, momentarily setting aside his own concerns in the face of this urgent situation. I'll take her, but I'll need at least 30 gallons of diesel, he stated, the urgency evident in his voice. With a sense of urgency, Jake urged the cashier to hurry. Amidst the chaos, he calmly lifted the woman, his arms unwavering, and settled her gently into the passenger seat of his truck. Despite the circumstances, he made sure she was as comfortable as possible. As soon as the truck was prepared, Jake swiftly took his place behind the wheel, his mind fully focused on the task ahead. Unexpectedly, the woman, in the midst of her agony, turned to him and exclaimed, "You're a liar." Confusion washed over Jake as he realized that her words were likely a result of her delirium caused by the pain. "Ma'am, I'm not Jack," he calmly assured her, his voice betraying the rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. With determination, he started the truck, the engine roaring to life as he skillfully maneuvered onto the road. His hands tightly gripped the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the snowy path ahead. Every passing second felt crucial, igniting a newfound clarity and purpose within him that had been absent for weeks. Jake's truck raced through the city streets, finally arriving at the hospital entrance. Despite the urgency, his priority remained ensuring the woman's safety in the hands of the medical professionals. As Jake bid farewell to the staff, he couldn't shake the image of the woman's anguished face and her mistaken belief that she knew him. Driving through the quiet streets of the city, he couldn't escape the haunting gaze she had fixed upon him. It was unsettling how strongly she recognized him, even in the midst of her pain. This encounter made him ponder the intricate web of connections between people, the countless lives intersecting in ways beyond comprehension. Unable to find solace in sleep, Jake decided to rise at midnight and seek the company of Mr. Williams. The elderly man, accustomed to late nights since his wife's passing, warmly welcomed Jake with a steaming cup of coffee. The softly lit room, filled with cherished memories and the gentle ticking of an old clock, provided a soothing backdrop as they began to converse. Jake found himself recounting the unexpected tale of his involvement in assisting a pregnant stranger, the wise words of Mr. Williams echoing in his thoughts, urging him to pay the woman a visit as the chess pieces glided across the board in a contemplative dance. As Jake lay in bed that night, the events of the day resurfaced, forming a puzzle with pieces that seemed to be missing. The following morning, driven by a blend of curiosity and a lingering sense of incompleteness, Jake was compelled to take action once again. Once again, he found himself standing within the sterile walls of the hospital. Stepping through the entrance, his presence caught the attention of a nurse, a broad smile stretched across her face, brimming with anticipation. With a hint of both puzzlement and gentle admonishment, she inquired, "Are you the father?" Jake's bewilderment mirrored the nurse's, yet for entirely different reasons. Attempting to make sense of the situation, he mustered a weary and perplexed tone. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding," he began, only to be interrupted by the nurse's continuing laughter. Flipping through a stack of papers, she mentioned that the woman had said her husband brought her to the hospital. "You must be her husband, right?" she playfully inquired, meeting Jake's tired gaze. He was too worn out to clarify the misunderstanding. "May I have a moment with her?" "I just need to ask her something," Jake requested, his voice weighed down by weariness and exasperation. The nurse's smile faded as she gently shook her head. "I'm sorry, but Melissa is currently resting," she replied, her tone apologetic. The nurse explained that the woman had experienced a significant loss of blood during childbirth and was currently receiving intensive care. Visitation would be permitted in 3 days, but then the nurse added an unexpected detail: they had a child, a cute little boy who was doing well. The mention of a child sent Jake's mind spinning, his expectations suddenly shattered. He muttered to himself, "So her name is Melissa." As a small piece of the puzzle fell into place, the overall picture remained hazy and bewildering. As he departed, the nurse's laughter and offhand comment about him being strange lingered in the air. Jake's world, already thrown into disarray by recent events, felt even more unstable. The echoes of those events reverberated in his ears, intensifying the tilt of his reality. 3 days later, Jake found himself back at the hospital, a mix of curiosity, anxiety, and an unusual sense of duty pulsing through his heart. When he finally encountered Melissa, words eluded him for a moment, leaving her wide-eyed and speechless. In a sudden burst of emotion, Melissa cried out, "Oh, Jack," and embraced Jake tightly. He comfortingly patted her back and guided her to a nearby chair, taking a seat beside her. As Melissa's sobs gradually subsided into quiet sniffles, Jake attentively listened, setting aside his own troubles. In a momentary lapse of memory, the name slipped from her mind. With deliberate kindness, he handed her a glass of water, his movements filled with compassion. Perching gently on the edge of the bed, Jake's voice was soft yet resolute. "I apologize, but I am not acquainted with whoever you believe me to be." "My name is Jake," he spoke, hoping to gently dispel her illusion. Reaching into his pocket, he retrieved his driver's license, offering it as tangible evidence. "We crossed paths 4 days ago. I was the one who brought you here." He extended the license toward Melissa. As her eyes fell upon it, Melissa's face crumbled, tears welling up and cascading down her cheeks. Trembling, the weight of reality crashed upon her. Her sobs echoed through the room, each word cracking with pain as she expressed her desperate hope that Jack was still alive. Seeking solace in the kindness of a stranger, Melissa leaned into Jake, her tears dampening his shoulder. "You bear such a striking resemblance to him," she managed to whisper, her voice filled with shattered dreams. The possibility of a Christmas miracle had flickered in her heart, only to be extinguished by the cruel reality. As Melissa's tears subsided into quiet sniffles, Jake moved slowly and with care, offering her a glass of water. With empathy lacing his gentle curiosity, he softly inquired, "If you're willing, could you share with me what happened to Jack?" Melissa nodded, her trembling hand bringing the glass to her lips as she mustered the strength to begin her heartbreaking tale. "Jack, my beloved husband, bore a striking resemblance to you," she began, her voice quivering with emotion. "Sadly, he departed from this world 3 months ago. He possessed an entrepreneurial spirit and poured his heart into his car service business." Pausing to collect her thoughts, she continued, "Our lives took an unexpected turn when Mark, an old comrade from Jack's army days, re-entered our existence. Mark had endured a tumultuous past, having served time in prison for a tragic altercation. Upon his release, he faced countless challenges in securing steady employment." Melissa's grip tightened on the hospital blanket, her fingers twisting nervously as she relived the painful memories. Jack, driven by his desire to help, had offered Mark a position as a mechanic. However, Mark yearned for more, aspiring to be a manager. Jack, knowing he couldn't trust Mark with such responsibility, had to decline. Melissa's voice quivered, holding back tears as she recounted the strain in their relationship. Mark harbored resentment toward Jack for denying him the promotion. Day by day, the tension between them grew, while Mark skillfully concealed his true emotions behind a friendly facade. But cracks began to appear in that facade when Mark extended an unexpected invitation to Jack for a weekend fishing trip. Melissa's unease lingered in her memory. "I had a bad feeling about it," she admitted, regret seeping into her voice. But Jack, always the optimist, placed his trust in Mark and dismissed any potential harm. Unfortunately, the trip took a tragic turn. Melissa's hands quivered as she recounted the heart-wrenching news of Jack's fall overboard, becoming entangled in the fishing equipment beyond anyone's rescue. Her voice carried a hint of doubt. Everyone believed Mark's account, as who would have been present on the river during the early hours of that October morning to witness the truth? Jake's gaze locked with Melissa's, her eyes filled with an unsettling certainty. Yet Jack, always cautious and equipped with a life vest, was a skilled swimmer. It didn't add up. Tears welled up in Melissa's eyes once again, cascading down her cheeks. As Jake tenderly refilled her glass with water, he murmured, "I'm deeply sorry for your loss and everything that has unfolded since." His next question hung in the air, hesitant. "How did you find yourself at the gas station without your coat?" Melissa inhaled deeply, trying to steady herself, wiping away her tears. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled with vulnerability. "Mark became a constant presence in my life after Jack's passing. He persistently pursued me, proposing marriage and offering to help raise my child." The disbelief and despair in her eyes were evident as she shook her head. "Despite my repeated refusals and pleas for him to leave me alone, he remained relentless, always returning. Eventually, I reached a breaking point and stopped allowing him into my life. However, one fateful day, as I returned from the shop, Mark intercepted me. He forcefully placed me in his car and drove us to a secluded area in the woods. Unfortunately, the car broke down there. Desperate to escape, I attempted to flee. Mark managed to grab hold of my jacket, but I broke free, leaving the jacket behind. From that point on, my memories become hazy. I believe I ran until exhaustion took over. And the next thing I remember was waking up in your truck. Jake nodded, his expression mirroring a mix of concern and curiosity. With a look of comprehension dawning on his face, as if the scattered fragments of a bewildering enigma had at last fallen into perfect alignment, he rose from his seat and bid Melissa a solemn farewell. Making his way down the dimly illuminated hospital hallway towards the staircase, he was on the verge of crossing the threshold when Melissa's voice, filled with delicate anticipation, stopped him in his tracks. "Jake, once I'm released, would you be willing to take me home?" "I have no one else to rely on," Melissa pleaded, her words barely audible. Without a moment's hesitation, Jake responded with calm reassurance, "You can count on me. I'll always be by your side." With calmness that belied the chaos within, he swiftly jotted down his contact details on a torn piece of paper. "When you're ready to go, just give me a call. I'll be there for you in an instant." Melissa's hands quivered like leaves in the autumn breeze as she delicately held onto the paper, carefully tucking it into the pocket of her hospital gown. Gratitude filled her voice as she whispered, "Thank you," her tear-filled gaze fixed upon Jake, their connection unbreakable. "I'll wait for you," Jake said, his footsteps fading away down the corridor. As he walked, a shiver ran through him, not from the cold, but from the weight of the moment they had just shared. The next day, driven by an unsolved mystery from his past, Jake found himself standing in front of the orphanage where he had spent his childhood. The building, a sanctuary of memories, stood just as it had before, its walls painted a vibrant green, adorned with larger-than-life images of superheroes, as if protecting the dreams of the children inside. The hallways reverberated with the familiar sounds of youthful energy, yet the faces of the children remained a mystery. Jake couldn't help but notice the striking resemblance between the children before him and his own melancholic childhood. Their eyes held a glimmer of fragile hope, barely perceptible yet ever present. As Jake made his way through the school, exchanging nostalgic greetings with familiar faces from the staff, he eventually found himself in the office of the headmistress, Mrs. Hudson. The room seemed frozen in time, its walls adorned with photographs capturing the countless children who had once walked through these very doors. Without wasting any time, Jake jumped right into the reason for his arrival, his voice laced with a blend of nervousness and haste as he brought up Jack. As his words flowed, Mrs. Hudson's countenance underwent a subtle transformation, a flicker of darkness passing over her face. She made her way to the window, her eyes fixed on the outside world as if searching for solutions in the scenery. As she began to speak, her voice carried a sense of sorrow, as if burdened by the weight of the past. "When you first arrived here, you were not alone," she said, her words tinged with regret. "On that bitterly cold winter day, there were 2 tiny infants in our care." Pausing for a moment, she turned away from Jake, her gaze fixed on some distant memory. "Those were difficult years," she continued, her voice filled with the hardships they had endured. "We were overwhelmed with abandoned babies, struggling to find enough space for everyone." Taking a deep breath, she revealed the heart-wrenching decision they had made. "In the end, we had to make a choice. We decided to keep you here and give your brother to a childless couple who longed for a child." As she spoke, her reflection in the window seemed to flicker, mirroring the emotions that still haunted her. "I can still vividly recall the day they took your brother away," she whispered, her voice filled with the pain of that moment. "You cried inconsolably, and everyone tried their best to comfort you. The connection shared between twins is truly profound, a bond that runs deep. However, tragedy struck 3 years later when we learned that the couple had divorced. In a heartbreaking turn of events, your brother was given up and sent to another orphanage. At that time, our orphanage was already overwhelmed with children, and there was not a single spare bed available. This cruel twist of fate tore you apart from each other. I apologize deeply for not telling you sooner." The weight of this revelation crashed over Jake like a powerful tidal wave, leaving him momentarily breathless. He gripped his head in his hands, trying to comprehend the magnitude of the truth. Could Jack still be alive? If only his wife could be spared from this immense sorrow. How did everything become so tangled and distorted? His voice trembled with a whirlwind of emotions. The figure of Mrs. Hudson, outlined by the glow of the window, could only respond with a defeated shrug, burdened by the weight of choices made over the course of many years and the unforeseen outcomes they brought. "I apologize sincerely, Jake. There are certain aspects of life that elude our understanding, beyond our influence," she murmured, her voice carrying the faint trace of regret. Overwhelmed by the suffocating atmosphere of revelations and repentance, Jake abruptly stood up, causing his chair to scrape loudly against the floor. With a sense of liberation, he briskly departed from the confines of the office, each stride carrying him further away from an intangible weight that had burdened him. The orphanage, once a sanctuary of hope, now seemed like a chamber of forsaken dreams. Stepping into the open air, he inhaled deeply, as if emerging from the depths of a murky past. The journey home became a hazy blur, his mind entangled in a labyrinth of thoughts, occasionally interrupted by his habitual glances at the screen of his phone. However, the eagerly awaited call from Melissa remained frustratingly elusive, intensifying his already tumultuous emotions. It was not until the break of dawn the following day that the call he had been yearning for finally came. Melissa's voice, a mixture of relief and trepidation, shattered the stillness of the morning, informing Jake of her release from the hospital. Filled with a sense of urgency, Jake hailed a taxi and raced straight to the medical facility. Upon his arrival, he discovered Melissa outside, cradling her son, a poignant image of tender motherhood against the backdrop of the hospital. Jake made his way closer, a smile creeping onto his face as he beheld the baby's cherubic countenance, cradled in Melissa's arm. Extending his hand, he delicately brushed the baby's nose with his finger, causing a sweet, bubbling sound to escape. "Let's go home," he whispered gently, his voice a comforting refuge amidst the chaos of their lives. With a solemn promise in his actions, he held open the car door for Melissa, pledging to protect and stand by them as they faced an uncertain future. Melissa's apartment, once nestled in the vibrant heart of the city, now stood in the shadow of the car service business that her husband, Jack, had painstakingly built. It had become a painful reminder of betrayal, as Mark had deceitfully seized control through forgery. As they drove past, Melissa's eyes lingered sadly on the familiar building, her heart heavy with silent despair. Sensing her unease, Jake reached out and gently placed his hand on hers, offering solace in his touch. Jake settled the taxi fare upon arriving at the apartment complex, and together they entered the building. Melissa's grip on her son tightened as they approached, her voice barely audible as she whispered, "It's him," nodding toward a figure in the distance. Shielding his eyes from the bright sun, Jake could make out the tall, gaunt silhouette of Mark. There was something unsettling about him, with his long black cloak and dark glasses that gave him an almost ghostly appearance. Mark noticed Melissa and waved, his gesture filled with an unnerving nonchalance. In response, Jake quickly averted his gaze, hiding his face to avoid being recognized. Sensing the urgency, Melissa clutched her son tightly and took hold of Jake's hand, urging them to hasten towards the building, their steps quickening into a near run. Once inside her apartment, Melissa locked the door with a trembling hand, and Jake found himself in a hallway that bore a striking resemblance to his own. He sank into the sofa in the living room, his eyes wandering around the modest space until they landed on a photograph resting on the chest of drawers, adorned with a black ribbon. As his eyes fell upon the image, a sharp breath escaped him. It was a picture of his twin brother, Jack. The resemblance was astonishing, the same sleek black hair, the same deep brown eyes, the same subtle curve of the lips. In that moment, Jake felt as though he was gazing into a mirror, seeing his own reflection. The reality of the situation hit him like a tidal wave. It was no wonder Melissa had mistaken him for Jack, they were identical in every possible way. If Jake hadn't known the truth beforehand, he might have questioned his own sanity upon seeing this exact replica of himself. Suddenly, a knock at the door shattered the tense silence in the apartment. Melissa, moving cautiously, peered through the peephole, her body instinctively recoiling, a soundless gasp escaping her lips. Sensing the urgency, Jake approached. A tremor of fear laced her voice as she spoke, the relentless pursuer had them cornered. Jake quickly directed her to take her son to safety in his room. With a discreet touch, he activated the voice recorder on his phone, preparing for what was to come. Gathering himself, he opened the door, putting on a facade of calmness. With a forced smile, he asked, "What brings you here, Mark?"